Norway's squad for the 2025 Euros this summer has finally been released, meaning I can make the video that I have been dreading to make. A preview of Norway before the Euros. Let's just put it this way. I have been hurt by this team before. June 22nd, 2019 is the day that changed my life. That summer's Women's World Cup is really what got me into women's football, especially because my national team, Norway, had a strong tournament. We had a great group stage, dispatching Nigeria and South Korea. The loss to France was painful, being decided by a controversial penalty against a young Ingrid Engen, but it showed we can still hang with the top national teams. Then came the round of 16 where we were facing off against a strong Australian side. But luckily for us, Sam Kerr had one of the worst games of her career. The match went to penalties and we won. I don't think I've ever been happier about a football match in my life. Unfortunately, our run did end in the quarterfinals against a rising England. It was heartbreaking, but the overall performance was promising. Just 2 years earlier, the 2017 Euros had been a disaster. We didn't score a single goal in the group stage. Our best player even quit the team at just 22 years old, worn down by the Federation's failures. But in 2019, it felt like we were turning a corner. Norway was climbing back up towards where it belonged, among Europe's elite. Oh boy, was I wrong. Remember, this is a team that has won the World Cup before and Euros twice. In fact, for the past 2 weeks, you may have seen posts about the anniversary of the 1995 World Cup 30 years ago. And all of it isn't ancient history. We're runners-up at the Euros as recently as 2013 with some current players on that team. But since that win over Australia in 2019, the national team has been nothing but an absolute mess. The team has underperformed at every corner and has lost in devastating fashion over and over again. Like at the last World Cup in 2023, the players said that their only goal was just get out of the group stage. What? This is a group that you should be winning easily, and they didn't. Now, here we are, right before the 2025 Euros. Our third head coach in 3 years, and a squad stacked with talent, some of the best players in the world. So what should we expect from this team? A team with a winning legacy at the Euros, but the past few Euros have been a disaster. What needs to happen for Norway to finally perform to their potential, and why do we keep falling short and underperforming expectations? The squad was announced 2 days ago, so let's go through it. On paper, this is one of the strongest rosters in the tournament. On paper being the key phrase there though. Starting off with the defense, Cecilie Fiskerstrand of Fiorentina will be starting between the sticks. Ever since returning to the national team from her ACL tear, she has been one of the best performing players on the national team, which is kind of crazy considering goalkeeping has been one of Norway's main weaknesses since the retirement of Ingrid Engen. Fiskerstrand is not perfect. There are times where she should have saved a certain goal, but I have lost count of how many games she has bailed out the defense and just saved us. Aurora Mikkelsen, who just joined Cologne in the Frauen Bundesliga this January, is likely the backup. Hopefully she won't be needed. Defense is interesting. There's a lot of rotation between who starts. National team and Chelsea legend Maren Mjelde is back in the squad, usually one of the center backs. You then have Guro Reiten, who just secured a move from Brighton to Wolfsburg, a player who's really coming into her own later in her career. At the third center back slot, we have youngster Mathilde Harviken. She began to start for the national team around 2 or 3 years ago, back when she was at Rosenborg. At the age of only 23, she is now a consistent starter for Serie A champions Juventus. Fun fact, she actually won the league with them on Norwegian Constitution Day. Bayern Munich's Tuva Hansen is another consistent starter. She's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type vibe in backline. She's versatile, able to play center back or fullback, but hasn't quite matched her club form for her national team. Still, having that flexibility matters, especially when fullback is a thin position for us. Frida Maanum has been the go-to right back the past couple of years, even though she plays actually in the midfield with her club. She just signed for Wolfsburg after years with Vålerenga. Here's the thing. Despite playing out of position and playing in the domestic Norwegian league, she was by far one of the team's best performers before her ACL tear. And I mean outperforming the players for Barcelona and Women's Super League players. Hopefully we get that form out of her again this tournament. Now for the true fullbacks, of which there are only 2, left back Marit Bratberg Lund, and right back Emily Voldvik. Lund is more of an offensive fullback and has been playing for Benfica since July of last year. Woldvik is a year younger at 26 and has been playing for Rosengard in the Swedish league since January, rising up in the national team ranks. A lot of fans are upset that Martin Ostensad didn't make the squad, and fair enough, honestly. She's captain of one of the best domestic sides and plays in a position where Norway lacks depth. But it's hard to see Norway dropping Hansen, Mjelde, Bergsfand, or Harviken for her, especially because they need true fullbacks, so they can't really take another center back. Ever since Hegerberg and Gemma Grainger took over, the offense has been the issue, not the defense. The defense has been much better than the offense. They are still prone to mistakes, but if the Norwegian team loses games, the offense is 9 out of 10 times more to blame. In 6 games in Nations League this year, they only let in 5 goals. Defense was doing their thing. However, offensively, they only scored 4. You heard me right, only 4 goals in 6 games. That's compared to France's 14 goals and Iceland's 6. They tied for goals scored with Switzerland, who finished bottom of the group. So yeah, the defense carried this team. And it's so weird because the media and online, people keep talking about the defense being bad for Norway and the problem. Probably because of the quality of the players comparatively. But no, it's the offense that's been the issue since the aftermath of the 2022 Euros. In reality, only 3 players scored in Nations League this year, and they all only scored once. That is not good. And honestly, part of the offensive struggles can be traced back to the midfield. Again, another solid group of players on paper. Most fans will recognize the big names. Barcelona's Ingrid Engen, Arsenal's Frida Maanum, and Atletico Madrid's Vilde Borissa. Since 2019-2018, this midfield should have been one of the best in the world. 3 high-quality players. But for whatever reason, it hasn't clicked between the 3. Partly, you can put that on coaching. Hegerberg putting Ingrid alone in a pivot spot against New Zealand was a disaster class in coaching. You need Vilde there also. That said though, Engen should have been able to handle it, and she didn't. Engen has delivered some of those memorable moments for the Norwegian team, good and bad, but to give her credit, she's looked a lot sharper for Norway in recent months. Hopefully playing at Lerkendal gave her a boost. Now, if you look at Engen and Borissa individually, they don't seem to be playing badly, but in reality, they are struggling to control possession of the game. Part of it is due to the poor passing from the fullbacks, but Borissa and Engen need to get more involved. I think it would be best if they both played defensive midfield roles while being a double pivot, but for that to work, you need an attacking midfielder that can distribute the ball. Frida Maanum should be that player, but she doesn't quite fit. She's kind of the women's football version of a Kai Havertz or João Felix, incredibly talented, but without a clear position. When used correctly, she's impactful, but it's tough because most managers aren't going to build a system around one positionless player. So when she's forced into a fixed role, her influence fades. Maanum has played her best for Arsenal, honestly, when she is near a number 9 spot, and that is a huge problem for both Arsenal and Norway. There are only 2 true central midfielders on Norway's roster, Justin Kjelland and Lisa Noalsson. If Grainger wants a midfield that functions, I think she has to start Kjelland, who was a good player for Wolfsburg this year. Why? She's a distributor, she gets assists and she plays well. Noalsson plays for a large club, Manchester United, but she barely plays and doesn't so much when she does. I personally would have called up Hammarby's Emily Jaramo, who is a young traditional midfielder, over Lisa Noalsson, but as I get into later, Grainger didn't call up any of the Hammarby girls for some reason. Honestly, with the midfield struggles, the continued exclusion of Olaug Tvenden makes no sense either. She has transitioned into more of a winger role this year, but historically has been an attacking midfielder or wide midfielder. She has consistently been one of the top scorers in the Norwegian league, and for some reason, they just don't call her up. Maybe a better one-to-one comparison is Karina Sævik. Tvenden is hands down a better attacker, and they both play at the same club. But for some reason, Sævik's spot on the team is ironclad, despite some of the worst misses I have seen in my life. Don't get me wrong, I love Sævik, but this is a huge problem Norway has. They don't really step outside of set players. They need to experiment more with players from the domestic league, but they don't, sticking to certain players despite their results clearly not being in their favor. So yeah, if Norway are going to call Karina Sævik a midfielder in their call-up, that spot should have at least gone to Tvenden. Chelsea star Guro Reiten is listed as a midfielder here, which, come on, we need to put this thing to rest. Playing as a number 8 in the World Cup was like probably the worst thing ever to happen to the national team. Again, Hegerberg strikes again. Reiten is a left winger. If you're gonna call her a midfielder, at least use her as a 10. That I could be convinced of. Out of the front three, Reiten, Hegerberg, and Graham Hansen, Reiten has been the most effective for the team in the past few years. Now, fully into the attack, I have some notes. How the fuck did none of the Hammarby girls get called up? Sin Jensen, good player. Glad she's finally being called up more. Katinka Tandberg is the future of this team. But to be fair, Tandberg hasn't started off the season that well compared to last year, so this may be a form thing. But Jensen hasn't played that well this year either, only getting 4 goals in La Liga. So why is she being called up over Sophie Roman Haag, another striker option? Again, to be fair though, Haag also has been struggling this year, so her not being called up isn't crazy. But at this rate, why not just take a chance on Tandberg then? The Julie Blokstad exclusion baffles me because she has had a good start to the season for Hammarby, and yet cannot get into this team over Saivik. Make it make sense! Signe Galpset plays as an attacking midfielder for Brann and has been having an amazing season in Norway. However, we haven't really seen that translate to the national team so far. I mean, she's only 20, right? So there's time, but I'm scared that she might fall into the same positionless trap as Maanum. Again, she's going to be a good player for us in the future, but again, Svenden would have made more sense here. Now, let's talk about the big names up front aside from Reiten. Celine Bizet, Caroline Graham Hansen, Elizabeth Turland, and of course, Ada Hegerberg. Once again, on paper, this group should be putting up numbers, but they're not, they barely score. Turland and Bizet do have their moments together. They obviously have chemistry from playing at United together and Norway U19s. Simply put, having them on the field together is good because those two have chemistry, which is why it is so strange that we don't see more of a connection between Guro Reiten, Caroline Graham Hansen, and Ada Hegerberg. These three have been playing together for so long. In fact, Hansen and Hegerberg were both on that Norwegian side that reached the European final in 2013 as 18-year-olds. Yet, despite their history, Hansen and Reiten can't seem to find Hegerberg. Now, on outside view, it can seem that Hegerberg isn't really involved in the attack, but I don't think it's a matter of effort. She's a poacher. She needs service, and right now she's not getting it. Most of the crosses into the box are completely blind. Just hit and hope. No one's actually looking for her. Meanwhile, Graham Hansen can get something going, but she needs to look earlier for her teammates. When something isn't going her way, her body language isn't great. But I love that she is competitive. We need more of that from anybody else. She wants to win. She's a really competitive player, but her visible frustrations are not helping the team. This is where leadership matters. These players, world-class players, seem too comfortable with mediocrity. Sure, you can blame coaching, but at some point it's on the players too. The top names in the squad have all said on record that expectations may be too high.
Yeah, it's hard that because we get compared to what happened 20 years ago when Norway won Olympics in 2000. It's like we still hear about it, but it's 24 years ago.
And maybe this is a side of me that grew up in the United States talking, but that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, you're admitting defeat. You should go into your tournament believing you can win, not that it's unfair that Norwegians have too high expectations of you. I watched a 16th seed UMBC beat my number 1 seed in University of Virginia in March Madness. And you are telling me Norway can't beat Spain? The players just don't have chemistry with each other, and I don't know how that's possible. It's like watching strangers play together despite the squad being consistent over the past few years. Like, looking back at the 1995 team, I was not alive, but it felt like a team. The identity was the team in Norway, not just the great players. But with this team, it feels like a collection of individual players. And that's not something you can solve overnight. Something happens to these players when they put on the Norway shirt. They turn into ghosts. They act like they want the ball, but the second they get it, they get scared. Like, I'm not joking, they panic. In their last game against France, the passing accuracy was only 70%, and most of those passes were just between the center backs. The attack isn't building anything. When a forward gets the ball, they look isolated, like they don't trust anybody around them. And that's why I think the Hammarby trio of Blokstad, Tandberg, and Dramo should have been called up, because at least they know each other. It's kind of a paradox. This team simultaneously needs to become more unselfish, but also want the ball at their feet more, if that makes sense. What I mean is every time a player touches the ball, they act like they are alone and they seem to panic. They need to trust their teammates more and their own movement. Of course, you want more from Gemma Grainger also. I do not see much resembling tactics when Norway hits the pitch sometimes. It feels like sometimes they're just relying on the talents of players, which does not work in this day and age. You can't just hoof a ball downfield anymore and hope one of the attackers gets control of it. The midfield needs to stay involved once the ball goes wide. I am tired of seeing fullbacks or wingers blindly whipping crosses, hoping someone's there. There needs to be interplay, triangles, link-ups, not desperate crosses. When Hansen is pinned in a corner, I want to see Engen lurking at the edge of the box, ready to connect with Bazet. These Euros in the next World Cup are probably the last chances we have to fully utilize Hegerberg, Hansen, and Reiten together. The Federation has already wasted so much of that window. Years of mistreatment killed morale, and now other countries have invested. These players need to believe in their brilliance though. They just don't when they put on the Norway kit, and it's heartbreaking. I don't fully buy the argument that the players have that the rest of the world has caught up, we're a small country, because the 1995 World Cup squad, they were one of the most talented nations in the world, but they weren't wildly more talented than the other top opponents. Germany and the United States had better players all around the pitch, while the 1995 Norwegian team had some of the best players in the world, and other players who were just competitive, but worse than the players in their positions in Germany and the United States. And that sounds a lot like the team we have today. We have some players that are above the England players, and then some players who are a step below. Yes, the Scandinavian countries certainly had a head start in women's football because of gender equality in their countries in the 80s and 90s. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at this Tiroso squad from 2013. But this Norwegian team should absolutely be competitive, just based on the quality they have throughout the squad, even the bench. It shouldn't be too hard to ask for a Ballon d'Or winner and two of the best wingers Europe has ever seen to score more than 1 goal a game. Listen, I will always be cautiously optimistic because the team has improved the past year, and I have been so negative this video, but I do have some hope. But I have been hurt so many times before by this team that I can't really get excited. Ada, Carolyn, and Maren Milde need to channel what was going on with the team when they made that 2013 final. What was different about that team, and how can they bring that here to potentially make a run? Someone in that Norwegian locker room needs to step up. Like, really step up. Yell. Demand more. Because pressure is a privilege. Hopefully they embrace expectations and this privilege at the Euros instead of running away from it like they usually do. Thank you so much for watching. Don't worry, I'll probably do a rise and fall of the Norwegian national team video at some point if you want the whole story. Also, if you want a squad breakdown of another team, let me know in the comments. And tell me, what do you think Norway needs to do to get back on track and back to the top of Europe?